Behold, he cometh with clouds, and every eye shall see him, and they also which pierced him, and all kindreds of the earth shall wail because of him. Even so.
Part 1 of the viewing gave historical references to Yahusha HaMashiach from a number of sources, mainly from the 1st to the 3rd centuries. From the writings of people who despised him, or perhaps were just simply indifferent towards him, Yahusha's presence has certainly been historically documented all the same. Part 2 will focus on archaeological finds surrounding the Gospels and also on the testimonies of some of Yahusha's apostles, whilst considering what those testimonies could have meant if given in today's time. And so, beginning with archaeological finds that validate or prove the truth of the Gospels, we'll start with King Herod. As written in the book of Yahuah chapter 2 verse 1, Yahusha was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king. Herod the king was born in Palestine in 73 BC and was appointed king of Judea in 37 BC until his death 40 years later, around the time of Yahusha HaMashiach's birth. At the time, a star rising in the east was reported to Herod by wise men, representing the arrival of Yahusha HaMashiach in Bethlehem. Herod would go on to feel troubled by the arrival of Yahusha, and so, when he had gathered all the chief priests and the scribes of the people together, he demanded of them where HaMashiach should be born. And they said unto him, In Bethlehem of Yahud, for thus it is written by the prophets, And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Yehuda, are not the least among the princes of Yehuda, for out of you shall come a governor, that shall rule my people, Yasha'el. Herod the king must have viewed Yahusha HaMashiach's arrival as a threat, and so he plotted to kill him, which Yahuah then warned Joseph of in a dream and instructed him to hide in Egypt. So Joseph took his wife Miriam along with baby Yahusha and did as instructed, and just in time, because Herod went on to kill all children in Bethlehem aged 2 and younger. Forward to modern times, and in southern Israel, in Masada, on the edge of the Judean desert, above the Dead Sea, is an ancient stone fortress. And in 1996, archaeologists found fragments of clay wine jars with King Herod's name on. In Latin, the top line inscription mentions the Roman consul C. Sentio, full name Sentius Saturninus, who was in office as what would be called today a politician in 19 BC. This dates around the time when the wine jar was made, which was 14 years after Herod was appointed king. The middle line reads the type of wine that was produced, and the bottom line of the jar reads the name and title Regis Herodis Iodasi, translating as of King Herod of Judea.
One of the most important finds of this season and altogether in Masada is a piece of an amphora, storage jars for transporting wine, which I hold in my hand, and which is for inscribing for the first time the full name of Herod on an archaeological find.
The discovery identifies Herod the king of Yahuah chapter 2 and contributes to validating the Gospels, lending a great weight to the account of what took place at the time Yahusha was born. And it just goes to show that the characters spoken of in the word were not fictitious, but very real and documented, having once been alive and functioning as we are today. Now there is at Jerusalem by the sheep market a pool, which is called in the Hebrew tongue Bethesda, having 5 porches. In these lay a great multitude of impotent folk, of blind, halt, withered, waiting for the moving of the water. For an angel went down at a certain season into the pool and troubled the water. Whosoever then first after the troubling of the water stepped in was made whole of whatsoever disease he had. Yahushua goes on to reveal the healing of a man suffering with an infirmity for 38 years, with his condition meaning that he was unable to enter the pool on his own, and so others would constantly enter before him. Yahusha was by the pool at the time and had asked him simply, "Will you be made whole?" And the man was made whole and told to pick up his bed and walk, which he did. The pool of Bethesda stands out to show once again the compassion and warmth of Yahusha, who healed many at his first coming. It also shows another example of the workings of the power of Yahuah, demonstrated many times throughout the scriptures. Now, what's additionally interesting about the pool of Bethesda is that between 1957 and 1962, archaeologists performed excavations around the area of Jerusalem described by Yahushua, and they uncovered a 5-sided pool in the sheep gate area, as Yahushua had said. Professor Urbain von Wald goes on to say in his book, Archaeology and John's Gospel, that the discovery of the pools provided beyond a doubt that the description of this pool was not the creation of the evangelist Yahushua, but reflected accurate and detailed knowledge of Jerusalem, knowledge that is sufficiently detailed to now be an aid to archaeologists in understanding the site. The Johannine account speaks of 1. Its location near the sheep gate, 2. the name of the pool as Bethesda, 3. the fact that it has 5 porticos, 4. the fact of intermittent turbulence in the water. All these details are corroborated through literary and archaeological evidence of the site. Yahusha's description given some 2,000 years ago has proven useful to archaeologists and undoubtedly also to followers of Yahusha HaMashiach in being able to know that the Bible stands as an accurate historical document. And just a few chapters ahead in the book of Yahushua, and there is also another pool which he happens to make mention of. A man that is called Yahusha made clay, and anointed my eyes, and said unto me, Go to the pool of Siloam and wash. And I went and washed, and I received sight. This was another one of Yahusha's miracles, performed on a man blind from birth, and specifically at the pool of Siloam, so that Yahuwah's name will be glorified. Because since the world began, was it not heard that any man opened the eyes of one that was born blind? And even then, in the face of an obvious righteous deed, many preferred to criticize, accuse, and disbelieve. The pool of Siloam was predestined to be built just for the occasion, because Siloam is, by interpretation, sent. It is located under the city of David and was built by King Hezekiah within the period of his reign between 716 to 687 BC. Within this time period, Hezekiah built a conduit or a tunnel to reroute the water in preparation of the attack of the Assyrian king Sennacherib. 2 Chronicles chapter 32 reveals. Sennacherib king of Assyria came and entered into Yehuda and encamped against the fenced cities and fought to win them for himself. And when Hezekiah saw that Sennacherib was come, and that he was purposed to fight against Jerusalem, he took counsel with his princes and his mighty men to stop the waters of the fountains which were without the city, and they did help him. So there was gathered much people together, who stopped all the fountains, and the brook that ran through the midst of the land, saying, Why should the kings of Assyria come and find much water? Verse 30 goes on to say, This same Hezekiah also stopped the upper watercourse of Gihon, and brought it straight down to the west side of the city of David, and Hezekiah prospered in all his works. The conduit that Hezekiah built later became part of Jerusalem's water system, connecting the Gihon, which is Jerusalem's fresh water supply, with the pool of Siloam. The water that still runs through this tunnel today is the same water from the same spring, the Gihon, that was a lifeline to the Israelite inhabitants in 700 BC, Jerusalem. The tunnel is cut directly through the mountain bedrock with hand chisels and is a half-mile long. And the rest of the acts of Hezekiah, and all his mights, and how he made a pool and a conduit, and brought water into the city, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Yehudah? In Jerusalem in 1880, in support of 2nd Chronicles and 2nd Kings, a Hebrew inscription dating 740 to 700 BC was found and identified as the Siloam inscription, describing the construction of a tunnel that brought water from the pool of Siloam to the city of David during Hezekiah's reign. The artifact is currently held in the Istanbul Archaeological Museum in Turkey. Nearly 1,000 years after the construction of the pool of Siloam, and a few centuries after Yahusha performed the healing of the blind man, to commemorate Yahusha's act, a site known as the Birka Silwan was built by the Byzantine Empress Eudocia between 400 to 460 AD. It was built in and around an area where the pool was thought to have been. However, the pool's exact location, as it existed during the time of Yahusha, officially became known in 2004. Repairs were being made to a large water pipe at the city of David, near the Birka Silwan, when archaeologists Ronnie Reach and Eli Shukran noticed the remains of ancient steps leading from the street level and into the pool. They went on to find stones with coins and pottery embedded into the cement, and were able to date the structure as part of a monumental pool from the Second Temple period, which is the period in which Yahusha lived.
If you look at the walls over here, down over here,
Yeah.
that's Hezekiah wall. Now Hezekiah, we're talking
Hezekiah's
about
wall.
700 BC. As you see, there's 5 steps on the flat, 5 steps on the flat, and another 5 steps at the bottom of the pool of Siloam. The pool, it goes all over the garden. It's a huge pool.
So why not take all this stuff out?
Because that's a private place. It's belong for the Greek Orthodox Church, and we don't have a permission to dig the whole side of the pool of Siloam.
Wouldn't they want it to be?
Maybe one day we try to buy from the land, but today it's, for politics they don't.
Is it just one guy?
It's the Greek Orthodox.
Greek Orthodox. So the Greek Orthodox don't want this excavated.
Not yet. We want to show the whole side of the pool of Siloam. As you see, one side of the pool, which is from that corner to here, so all of it is huge.
Right. Why is it?
No, we have to hurry,
so this
right?
pool was this was there. That's like bedrock there.
Yeah, that's the bedrock.
So they cut that deep to get to the pool.
Yeah, no, they to the pool. They used to come over here. You see, these are the original steps.
Oh, they're
People
the
were
steps.
coming- yeah, these are
That would go outside so there was a gate here.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Because all of the people was coming from the north. They're coming this way.
Right.
And they'll come down to the pool of Siloam. Well, these are original steps. What you see over here, we found the original steps.
Yeah.
Here, Peter. Because all of the people was coming through the Kidron Valley. This is the Kidron Valley. So they're coming from the north, Mount of Olives, and all of this. They come through the Kidron Valley down to the pool
Okay.
of Siloam. And this was the meeting point during the 3 holidays of the year, which we are now one of the holidays.
Right.
Sukkot.
Right.
And
So
Pesach
everybody was
HaShabbat
here on-
was coming here and
Yeah.
walking up to the Temple Mount. So this was like a meeting point to go all over up to. And that's
So
the
that-
holy place for the Christian, where Jesus healed the blind man in John chapter 9.
Right, right.
As he's passed by, he saw a man blind from birth. The disciple asked him, Rabbi, who sent this man or his parents who was born blind?
Right, right.
And he spent on the floor, make him out from the saliva.
So that road isn't excavated and finished, is it?
It's you can walk through it.
But it's all muddy and everything.
Yeah.
I looked. Yeah. So that's
Where
not.
was
So they're
the
not.
Jews
If it's
escape?
all muddy, they're not down to the road then.
No. Part of the road, and you go through a tunnel.
Yeah.
The tunnel is a sewage tunnel from 2,000 years.
Okay.
It's
At this time, the pool is expected to be fully excavated in the coming months and exposed entirely for the first time. Left-wingers suggest that this is part of a campaign to expand control over parts of Jerusalem currently inhabited by Palestinians. However, discussions of rights to the land is a separate topic for another day. For now, what is seen is that the pool of Siloam is yet another discovery proving the truth of the testimonies of those who wrote the scriptures through the inspiration of Yahuah. The destruction of Jerusalem was one of the most standout events in the history of the Israelites, and came to its pinnacle in 70 AD at the hand of the Romans. Yahuah did foretell centuries before, through the prophet Yeshayahu, of a taking away of Yahushalem as a consequence of continuing disobedience within the nation of Yasha'el. Throughout scripture, it's seen how disobedience amongst Yasha'el was an ongoing theme, and right up until the present day, the 21st century, where for the last time Yahuah searches the earth and calls to Yasha'el to take hold of his renewed covenant through Yahusha HaMashiach, who Yeshayahu did also speak of. However, on the foretelling of the taking away of Yahushalem, Yeshayahu wrote between 701 to 681 BC through the inspiration of Yahuah. Behold, Adonai Yahuah Sebaoth does take away from Jerusalem and from Yehuda the stay and the staff, the whole stay of bread and the whole stay of water, the mighty man and the man of war, the judge and the prophet and the prudent and the ancient, the captain of 50 and the honorable man, and the counselor, and the cunning artificer, and the eloquent orator. Verses 25 to 26 goes on to say, Your men shall fall by the sword, and your mighty in the war, and her gates shall lament and mourn, and she being desolate shall sit upon the ground. Several centuries later, at around 30 AD, and Yahusha HaMashiach arrives at his first coming, preaching the kingdom of Yahuah and warning of an impending destruction upon Jerusalem. Written in the book of Marcus, it reads, And as he went out of the temple, one of his disciples said unto him, Master, see what manner of stones and what buildings are here. And Yahusha answering said unto him, See these great buildings? There shall not be left one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. The book of Lucas expands, where he said, And when ye shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies, then know that the desolation thereof is nigh. Just 30 or so years after these words of Yahusha, and just a decade or so after they were published, and they indeed came to pass, because in 66 AD, Roman Emperor Vespasian started the first Jewish revolt. He appointed his son Titus in 69 AD, and in 70 AD he captured and burned Jerusalem and plundered and destroyed the temple in the process. It's documented that only the Pharisees went on to survive and flourish. Emperor Hadrian went on to rebuild Jerusalem with its own temple to the pagan Roman god Jupiter, which was built on the site of the remains of the Israelite temple. Historically, the Romans took over from the Greeks, and it is documented in the book of Maccabees and also in other places how the Greeks were known to enforce the worship of their deities. In the 2nd century BC, it is documented. The king sent an old man of Athens to compel the Yahudim to depart from the Torah of their fathers and not to live after the Torah of Elohim, and to pollute also the temple in Jerusalem and to call it the temple of Jupiter Olympius, and that in Gerizim of Jupiter the defender of strangers, as they did desire that dwelt in the place. Forward to 70 AD, where the Romans, now in place of the Greeks, took full control of Jerusalem, and through its plundering they came to ensure that their pagan deity Jupiter, who is synonymous with Zeus and Ezeus, would soon come to be falsely associated with Yahusha HaMashiach. After Jerusalem's destruction, for 25 years Emperors Vespasian and his sons Titus and Domitian issued coins in bronze, silver and gold commemorating the victory. Most were minted in Rome, others in Judea, and were inscribed in Latin and Greek. In further commemorations of Titus's victories, the Ark of Titus was constructed by his younger brother Domitian in 81 AD. The southern relief of the Ark depicts the siege of Jerusalem and the Romans carrying away its spoils, including the menorah, from the Second Temple. Byzantine historian Procopius gives a brief account of the Yahudim's treasures which were brought to Rome by Titus and others. However, several centuries later, the treasures were sent back to Jerusalem and to a sanctuary of Christians because it was thought that Jerusalem's sacking was the reason for Rome's eventual downfall. The sacking of Jerusalem was a pivotal moment in Israelite history and is heavily documented through several artifacts, as we have seen. And most significantly, the event was foretold by Yahuah and Yahusha HaMashiach, which should send shivers to the spine of any thinking person. Because if this event was foretold decades to centuries in advance, then what about the other foretold events which are yet to take place, and due to do so at times resembling exactly where we are today? Surely that's something to consider, especially at a time where it's universally known that the world is at its last end. With fossil fuel depletions and an overall reluctance to resort to renewable energies because of profit margins, the earth is now on its knees, and Yahuah has foretold that he will destroy those who are destroying the earth. Until then, he foretold of our duty to acknowledge his word, to acknowledge Yahusha HaMashiach, and the messages relayed through the prophets and the disciples. It's sometimes asked by cynics why the bodies of those documented in the Word of Yahuah have never been found. In answer, I would suggest that the bodies have been found, only to have their discoveries covered up because an admittance would provide empirical proof of the Word of Yahuah, and albeit carnal reasoning to abide by the moral standards proclaimed by the apostles as set by the Most High. Whereas we live in a world that's largely against moral standards, that's in preference of honoring oneself or honoring national objectives rather than a creator. The Word of Yahuah spoke of giants at one time being on the earth, and evidence of this has surfaced several times, only to then be hidden, dismissed, or destroyed. But why? Pondering on this brings me back to the biblical account of Matthew, where Yahusha was crucified and then revealed after his crucifixion, with chief priests and elders then going on to pay soldiers to say that his body had been stolen. The account reads, "Behold, some of the watch came into the city and showed unto the chief priests all the things that were done. And when they were assembled with the elders and had taken counsel, they gave large money unto the soldiers, saying, Say ye, his disciples came by night and stole him away while we slept. And if this come to the governor's ears, we will persuade him and secure you. So they took the money and did as they were taught. And this saying is commonly reported among the Yahudim until this day." As read, there was a willingness to pay others in authority in order to secure lies, which shows the mindset and the lengths that some would go to in order to suppress truths. Hiding or destroying the remains of biblical characters will be top agenda of elite powers. Many within these circles recognize truths of Yahuwah's word and undoubtedly feel threatened by it coming to light, which would only hasten the end of their current kingdom and cause even more people to believe in and follow Yahusha HaMashiach. All the same, regardless of agendas to suppress information or discoveries, nothing can stay hidden forever. As Yahusha HaMashiach said, "There is nothing covered that shall not be revealed, neither hid that shall not be known." And so, whether between any time now and the time of Yahusha HaMashiach's second coming, all will be revealed. In the meantime, what hasn't been hidden is that the remains of Apostle Paul and Yahusha's cousin, Yochanan the Baptist, have strongly been suspected of being recovered. It's through the efforts of 1st to 4th century preservationists that archaeologists of today are able to consider the finds. And so, beginning with Paul, Apostle Paul was chosen by Yahuah to bear record of him and of his son Yahusha HaMashiach. As written of Paul, "For he is a chosen vessel unto me, to bear my name before the Gentiles and kings and the children of Yasha'al. For I will show him how great things he must suffer for my name's sake." In Rome, the Basilica of St. Paul marks the place where he was buried after his eventual martyrdom. In 2002, buried under the altar in a crypt in the Basilica, archaeologists investigated a tomb from 390 AD. They removed 2 large slabs of marble to reveal an unopened stone coffin with a Latin inscription on top that read, Paulo Apostolo Martyr, Paul Apostle Martyr. Archaeologists inserted a probe that revealed purple linen covered with gold flecks, incense, and small bone fragments. The remains were radiocarbon dated to the 1st century AD. Professor Scott Brodier and also the recently passed former Pope Benedict XVI both agree that the scientific analysis seems to confirm the unanimous and uncontested tradition that these are the mortal remains of the Apostle Paul. Similarly with Yahusha's cousin Yohachanan the Baptist, who was beheaded. In the 1st century there were people alluding to his body being retrieved. In 2010 in Bulgaria, Sveti Ivan, known as St. John's Island off the Black Sea, archaeologists found a marble reliquary under the altar of an ancient church, dated to have been buried in the ground a few centuries after Yohachanan's death. Near the marble box they found a small stone box with St. John inscribed into it. The smaller box was made from stone found in southern Turkey. The larger box seemed to have been made from marble stone found possibly around the Aegean Sea. Inside the marble box was a human tooth and the fragments of a human bone belonging to the jaw, a leg, a wrist, a rib, and the right hand from a man around the age of 40. The remains were buried at a time when the relic trade did not exist, and so burying them for monetary value would not have been an agenda. Yohachanan is documented to have been executed around 30 AD, and through radiocarbon dating, bone specialists dated the fragments to be between 5 to 75 AD. DNA experts also said that there was nothing to contradict them belonging to Yohachanan. At the end of the discoveries, we're left with strong positive suspicions along with mystery surrounding these two New Testament servants of Yahuwah through Yahusha HaMashiach. However, much more important than the physical remains of a person is the testimony that they left behind. Testimonies are what carry the weight and what go on to reveal the value of what has been left for those coming afterwards. Witnesses are called to stand and give testimony in a standard court system, with testimonies bearing heavy burden on the outcome. The jury then makes an informed decision, followed by the judge passing judgment based on the decision made. And coming to think of it, the predicament is the same even outside of a court scenario, with our environments becoming our testimonies, which is where we base our decisions, which Yahuwah then judges us on. If events of the scriptures were brought forward to today's time, there will be in attendance more than 500 witness testimonies for the case of Yahusha HaMashiach's existence and resurrection, and virtually a straightforward jury decision. Eyewitnesses of his death and of his appearance afterwards are what led to the huge transformation in his apostles becoming bold witnesses, and onto their own deaths in many cases. Some of them suffered horrendous deaths for their testimony and ministry, and as it's been commonly said, they would not have become martyrs unless they were totally reassured by Yahusha's resurrection and by the fact of death having no absolute power over them. A liar would not become a martyr. Of those closest to Yahusha during his time, there are direct and first-hand witness testimonies of Yahusha's ministry, death, and resurrection. We have Yahusha's apostle Yohachanan, otherwise known as John, who wrote down his first-hand testimony between 85 to 95 AD, directly testifying of Yahusha's life and of him being seen by his disciples after his death and resurrection. He writes, "This is the disciple which testifies of these things, and wrote these things, and we know that his testimony is true." He further makes clear that his testimony is written, that ye might believe that Yahusha is HaMashiach, the Son of Elohim, and that believing ye might have life through his name. He confirms that Yahusha showed himself alive unto his disciples 3 times after his death, in testifying, this is now the 3rd time that Yahusha showed himself to his disciples, after that he was risen from the dead. And before then, it was Yahusha that told him, that ye also shall bear witness, because ye have been with me from the beginning. We also have Apostle Matif Yahu, documented his testimony in 60 AD, a few decades after Yahusha's ascension. Writing in third person, Matithyahu says, "As Yahusha passed forth from hence, he saw a man named Matithyahu sitting at the receipt of custom, and he said unto him, Follow me. And he arose and followed him." Like Yahushua, Matithyahu gives first-hand testimony of what took place during his following of Yahusha, testifying of his dealings with others, of the miracles he performed, of his execution, and again, like Yahushua, testifying of himself and of his disciples seeing Yahusha after his execution and resurrection. He writes, "Then the 11 disciples went away into Galilee, into a mountain where Yahusha had appointed them. And when they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted." There is also Apostle Kepha, otherwise known as Peter, writing his epistles between 64 to 65 AD and testifying himself in saying, "We have not followed cunningly devised fables when we made known unto you the power and coming of our Adonai Yahusha HaMashiach, but were eyewitnesses of his majesty. For he received from Yahuwah the Father honor and glory, when there came such a voice to him from the excellent glory, This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. And this voice which came from heaven we heard, when we were with him in the Holy Mount." Like Yochanan and Matithyahu, Kepha also documented first-hand witness accounts of Yahusha HaMashiach. Then there's Paul, also known as Shaul, whose own individual and personal encounter with Yahusha HaMashiach led to the start of his ministry. As he journeyed, he came near Damascus, and suddenly there shined round about him a light from heaven. And he fell to the earth, and heard a voice saying unto him, "Shaul, Shaul, why do you persecute me?" And he said, "Who are you, Adonai?" And Adonai said, "I am Yahusha, whom you persecute." It was Lucas who wrote the book of Acts between 60 to 62 AD. Although not amongst the 12 apostles of Yahusha, nor a first-hand witness of him, his writings, inspired by Yahuwah, serve as historical documentation through his first-hand account of the eyewitnesses of Yahusha. He starts his account, written during the same time period that he wrote Acts, in saying, "For as much as many have taken in hand to set forth in order a declaration of those things which are most surely believed among us, even as they delivered them unto us, which from the beginning were eyewitnesses and ministers of the word, it seems good to me also, having had perfect understanding of all things from the very first, to write unto you." In writing unto Theophilus, and also unto us as readers, Lucas reveals his first-hand associations with Paul. In Acts 16, 19 to 10, he writes in first person and makes known, "A vision appeared to Paul in the night. There stood a man of Macedonia and prayed him, saying, Come over into Macedonia and help us. And after he had seen the vision, immediately we endeavored to go into Macedonia, assuredly gathered that Yahuwah had called us for to preach the gospel unto them." Lucas endeavored to go into Macedonia with Apostle Paul to preach the gospel. And it's through their companionship, documented here and in other places, that Lucas is able to reveal Apostle Paul's encounter with Yahusha HaMashiach. And from there, we can comfortably conclude that Paul would not have gone on to write 13 or 14 epistles between 48 and 67 AD, proclaiming much of the requirements of the renewed covenant under Yahusha HaMashiach, unless he had indeed met HaMashiach and been guided by the Ruach HaKodesh. As Paul said, "Am I not an apostle? Am I not free? Have I not seen Yahusha HaMashiach, our Adonai?" And not only did Paul himself see Yahusha HaMashiach, but he also testifies of the 12 apostles seeing him after his resurrection, along with 500 others. He testifies that HaMashiach died for our sins according to the scriptures, and that he was buried, and that he rose again the third day according to the scriptures, and that he was seen of Cephas, then of the 12. After that, he was seen of above 500 brethren at once. After that, he was seen of Jacob, then of all the apostles, and last of all he was seen of me also. In the Bible, Yohanan, Matithyahu, Kepha, and Paul all especially gave strong first-hand witness testimonies of Yahusha HaMashiach and laid much of the groundwork through the assistance of Yahuah, Yahusha, and the Ruach HaKodesh. Matithyahu, Kepha, and Paul would all go on to be martyred for their efforts, which would be a common theme amongst followers of HaMashiach who proclaim the need for change before it's too late in a world accustomed to immorality. From the day that Yahusha began his ministry, his resurrection as the foundation for salvation has remained intact for over 2,000 years, despite all obstacles. The expansion of the belief in Yahusha, who suffered a horrendous death, would not have expanded unless Yahusha was indeed raised back from the dead, defeating death and providing hope for the apostles and for the millions of followers that would come afterwards. If Yahusha had not secured his mark, the stir caused among Roman rulership and among other dissenters in the earlier centuries would not have been documented, nor would the accounts of the thousands upon thousands of martyrs that followed. Today we have our own testimonies, through the company we keep, the things that we do, through the general decisions that we make, and through the repercussions or judgments that follow. We have heard of a man, Yahusha HaMashiach, who left instructions for us through his apostles, who then wrote down what they experienced and what they saw, which is also supported and proved archaeologically. In the court systems today, if the apostles' first-hand testimonies of HaMashiach were brought to a jury, along with 500 plus other witnesses to verify, the jury would not have much, if any scope at all, to maneuver away from the truth of Yahusha HaMashiach. An overwhelming decision would be secure, and a judgment would be passed and followed based on the decision.